Hello, my name is Nigel Rapport. My talk is entitled Cosmopolitan Politesse, Loving Speech in the Good Society. The problem of society, according to one of the founding figures of social science, Georg Simmel, is that we only come to know the individual human beings with whom we interact by way of distortions, by the imposition of alien and alienating labels, categories, and taxonomies. We distort the other's individual identity when we claim to know them in collective and merely conventional terms, as members of classes, nations, genders, religions, communities, professions, and so on. Simmel described this as the tragedy of social life. In response, I've wanted to imagine a linguistic and behavioral style of public engagement that might be called Cosmopolitan Politesse. This is an interactional code by which one addresses the common humanity and the distinct individuality of those one interacts with, but classifies them in no more specific fashion. One presumes that in the social interaction, one is engaging with an individual human other, someone who might be called anyone, and not with a representative of some more substantive class, a woman, a Swede, a Jew, someone working class, heterosexual, pious, and so on. A human being, anyone, possesses an intrinsic identity by virtue of their distinct and finite embodiment. Each inhabits a body that affords a unique perspective on the world, a unique capacity for interpreting an environing world and making it meaningful, and a unique history and practice in such individual worldviews. This is the ontological reality of human individuality. Cosmopolitan Politesse seeks to recognize this and give it its proper respect, and so to emancipate anyone socially from the tragedy of merely being made subject to the arbitrary constructions, the fictions of cultural and symbolic classes and categories. A cosmopolitan public space is one of universality, where individual human beings meet, engage with, and make space for one another. One recognizes anyone as an individual human being entrained on a life course amid worldviews of his or her own determination, and one affords the other the space necessary to fulfill personal life projects to the extent that these do not prejudice the potential fulfillment of anyone else. In presuming the individuality of interacting citizens, however, Cosmopolitan Politesse does not expect an intimacy with them, does not claim to know or name another's private self. Cosmopolitan Politesse is a medium through which to interact with anyone at a respectful distance. One cares sufficiently about one's fellow human beings to ensure that they're given the space to come into their own, and do not become mere means to others' classificatory ends. But one does not wish or presume to know in any detail, or seek to influence in any substantial way, what another individual's coming into their own might entail. In sum, Cosmopolitan Politesse is a kind of linguistic and behavioral surface beneath which individual lives may be led in personally meaningful ways. It sets out to achieve a balance between a public respect for the individual other and a public ignorance of that other. Anyone, any individual human being, is accorded a place, recognized as a potential interlocutor, on the basis of their common humanity, and not on any requisite affiliation or supposed common identity. Cosmopolitan Politesse would manage human encounters with the intrinsic difference of human individual identities by seeing restraint and reticence as key virtues. Let me now briefly provide a context for these ideas. I'm a social anthropologist, but it was the philosopher Immanuel Kant who first proposed anthropology as a modern discipline, combining in his conception the epistemological with the ethical. Anthropology was to discover what it was to be human as a universal, species-wide set of common properties. And also, anthropology was to propose social arrangements by which humanity might best control its fate and secure justice for each individual human life. Kant's conception of anthropology was part of what he termed a cosmopolitan project, a bringing together in one vision the cosmos of a universe of humanity with the polis of specific locally led human lives. There were universal human capacities, and these came to be embodied in the substance of unique individual lives. Kant wanted to overcome the tenets of an ancient regime that denied such universality in the name of cultures and traditions that divided and hierarchicalized people according to accidental, inessential, and imposed differences of social class, religion, nationality, and gender. The human everywhere deserved the same epistemological and ethical recognition and respect. A contemporary formulation of Kantian cosmopolitanism is made by anthropologist Ernest Gellner. He writes, "We are all human and should treat each other decently and with respect. Don't take more specific classifications seriously." In other words, society, culture, nationality, ethnicity, religion, class are symbolic fictions by which we classify the world into insiders and outsiders, the same and different, good and bad, and by which we limit and fix, homogenize, stereotype, and essentialize identities. But such symbolic constructs, literally fictions, in that we make them up and they remain dependent on our belief in them, need have no place in the scientific apprehension of the human condition as an ontology, that is, as natural being, as an independent truth. And these symbolic fictions need have no place in the ideal vision of how human beings should be recognized and respected, included in a liberal society. Categorizing human beings according to ethnicity, religion, nationality, and so on violently reduces to a life of masks, not allowing the human to remain itself, violating individuality, shutting individual human life within a class. Let me quote again. To liberate human beings from the categories adapted uniquely for things is to enter a space where the other no longer offers itself to our powers. This is from Emmanuel Levinas, a Holocaust survivor whose philosophical work provides the most incisive contemporary mediation upon human engagement that is at once ethical and epistemological. According to Levinas, a cultural construction of the world is totalizing, potentially totalitarian, in that through systems of symbolic classification, all, the total of a known world, is included, assigned a place, defined, and limited. Cultural knowledge imposes a tyranny of the order of the same, as Levinas puts it, a violent possession that denies the independence and radical otherness of individual being. For what is ontologically primary and prior to culture is a true human subjectivity that is indiscernible. An authentically free society, in Levinas's words, is one that endeavors to render justice to that secrecy which for each person is his or her life. To enter into a free society is to supersede cultural traditions, to transcend the idols of place, family, tribe, and nation, and to admit that there is a not knowing which is of the essence of reality and fundamental to any moral being in the world. A society respectful of freedoms must start with the secrecy of subjectivity and not from totalizing concepts of collective sameness. Moreover, we experience beyond culture as human beings mundanely, Levinas insists, through intense emotional experiences such as love or suffering, through the exercise of scientific reason, but also through apparently banal acts of everyday civility, hospitality, kindness, and politeness. We mundanely engage with the individuality of life. As Levinas famously puts it, quote, "When I really stare with a straightforwardness devoid of trickery or evasion into the other's unguarded, absolutely unprotected eyes, a moral conscience is born that has nothing to do with cultural values or social institutions, but is rather an access to external being, to the individuality of life. This is the argument. This is the argument that Luce Irigaray develops in her essay, The Way of Love. To approach otherness in a way that does not violate and traduce the initial being of each human entails what Irigaray calls a dialoguing in difference. She names this loving speech. Loving speech is a linguistic and behavioral code that does not simply seize and name difference in a predetermined way, reproducing the same. Rather, loving speech develops the negative linguistic technique of reticence, a more silent being with, involving tentative approaches and withdrawals of visual, acoustic, and physical kinds that do not amount to a designating and classifying. Neither linear nor repetitive, not seeking assurance in any external measure of conventional authenticity, the reticent being with a loving speech is characterized by an indirection that has no cultural telos. No interactant in loving speech expects to overcome difference and make the other the same. This accords, finally, with the notion of a good society as defined by the moralist Iris Murdoch. A good society for Murdoch is not one where one considers doing good to fellow members so much as where one refrains from doing them harm. One refrains from visiting one's desires upon others. Goodness as a social virtue entails guaranteeing a space in which a society's members are afforded an optimum of opportunity for self-formation and self-expression. Real compassion is agnosticism, Iris Murdoch concludes. Or, to return to the phrasing with which this essay began, Cosmopolitan Politesse in a good society combines a loving attention to individual otherness with a virtuous abstention from a cultural politics of identity. One admits, as Levinas puts it, that even being face-to-face with the other is always a relationship with a mystery. Thank you.